My mom found out my income, so she showed up with my spoiled brother and demanded $4,500 monthly. I never thought I would be betrayed by someone I loved, especially not in front of so many people. But there I was, standing in my own doorway, watching my mother's face transform from feigned concern into something cold and calculating. Behind her, my 26-year-old brother Marcus shifted nervously, avoiding my eyes like he always did when things got uncomfortable. "Hazel. Honey, we need to talk," Mom said, pushing past me into my apartment without invitation. The scent of her expensive perfume filled the space, the same one she'd worn to my college graduation, back when she actually seemed proud of me. That felt like a lifetime ago that I'd worked so hard to keep my financial situation private. After landing my first real job as a marketing coordinator, I'd been careful about what I shared. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew my family. I knew how they operated. Money had always been the measuring stick in our household, and I'd spent years being measured short. "How did you find out where I live?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. My cousin Sarah, the only family member I still trusted, must have let something slip. Or maybe Mom had been more persistent in her detective work than I'd given her credit for. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice carrying that familiar whine I remembered from childhood. "Look, Hazel, we wouldn't be here if we had other options. You know how tight things have been since Dad's medical bills." The mention of Dad's condition hit me like a physical blow. I'd been sending money regularly, anonymous contributions through his medical payment portal. They didn't know it was me, and I'd intended to keep it that way. But somehow, they discovered not just my address, but apparently my income too. Mom settled onto my couch like she owned the place, her manicured fingers drumming against the armrest. "We know you're making good money now, sweetie. $48,000 a year, isn't it?" My blood went cold. That figure was accurate down to the dollar. "Marcus needs help getting back on his feet," she continued, her tone shifting into that manipulative sweetness I knew so well. "Just $4,500 a month until he can find something stable. It's not like you have anyone else to spend it on." The words hung in the air like poison. Not like you have anyone else to spend it on. As if being single made me less deserving of my own earnings. As if my independence was somehow selfish. I watched Marcus fidget with his phone, probably scrolling through social media while Mom did his dirty work for him. This was the same brother who'd crashed 2 cars I'd co-signed for, who'd borrowed money for emergencies that turned out to be video games and designer sneakers. The same brother who'd never once asked how I was doing during the hardest years of my life. Something inside me shifted as I stood there, feeling small in my own home. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, boundaries, and the way they'd always treated me like their personal ATM with legs. "I need time to think about it," I heard myself say, hating how weak my voice sounded. Mom's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, honey. Take all the time you need. We'll be in touch." As they left, the question that would haunt me for days began forming in my mind: will I choose to stay silent, or will I take control of my own story? After they left, I found myself sitting in the silence of my apartment, staring at the indentation Mom had left on my couch cushion. The familiar ache in my chest told me this wasn't really about the money, it was about all the times before. All the little cuts that had never quite healed. I remembered being 16, working weekends at the local grocery store while Marcus got a brand new car for his birthday. "Hazel doesn't need one," Mom had explained to relatives. "She's more responsible with public transportation." What she really meant was that I wasn't worth the investment. That Marcus's convenience mattered more than my independence. Then there was my high school graduation. I'd worked so hard to graduate valedictorian, imagining the pride on their faces as I gave my speech. But when the day came, they showed up 20 minutes late because Marcus had a minor fender bender in the parking lot of the mall. Not an emergency, not even a serious accident, just a scraped bumper that somehow took priority over the biggest moment of my academic life. The pattern was always the same. Marcus stumbled, and the family rushed to catch him. I succeeded, and they assumed I'd be fine on my own. College was when the betrayals became more calculated. Every semester, I'd receive emails about overdue payment notices while Marcus's tuition somehow always got paid on time. "You're so capable, honey," Dad would say during our brief phone calls. "We know you'll figure it out." And I did figure it out, through scholarships, part-time jobs, and ramen dinners that left me dizzy in my evening classes. I worked 3 jobs my senior year just to avoid taking out more loans. While Marcus failed half his classes and got a fresh start at a different school with a full family-funded reset. No consequences, no accountability, just another soft landing while I scraped by on determination and caffeine. The worst part wasn't even the financial inequality. It was how they rewrote history to make it seem fair. Hazel was always so independent, they'd tell people, as if my independence had been a choice rather than a necessity. As if working myself to exhaustion while watching my brother coast was somehow a character strength rather than a survival mechanism. Even my small victories got diminished. When I landed my first internship, Mom spent the entire dinner talking about Marcus's new girlfriend. When I got promoted to my current position, the family group chat somehow shifted to planning Marcus's birthday party within 3 messages. Every achievement I earned felt like a whisper in a room full of people shouting about someone else. Sitting there in my living room, I realized these weren't isolated incidents, they were a blueprint. A systematic way of teaching me that my value was conditional, that my needs would always come second. And that love in our family was a finite resource that Marcus had somehow monopolized. The question burning in my chest wasn't just about the money anymore. It was deeper, more painful. Can I confront these hidden wounds, or will they remain buried forever? 3 days passed before I could think clearly again. 3 days of replaying every conversation, every dismissive comment, every time I'd swallowed my pride and pretended their treatment was normal. But on Thursday morning, something shifted inside me as I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee, watching the sunrise through my window. I'd built this life myself. Every piece of furniture in this apartment, every bill paid on time, every small comfort I enjoyed, I'd earned it. Not through family connections or endless second chances, but through showing up when I didn't want to, working when I was tired, and believing in myself when no one else would. The realization hit me like cold water. I wasn't the problem. I had never been. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list. Not a to-do list, but something more important, a reality check. On one side, I wrote down everything I'd accomplished in the past 5 years. College graduation with honors, 3 promotions, my own apartment, a growing savings account, and genuine friendships built on mutual respect. On the other side, I listed what Marcus had achieved in the same timeframe. The contrast was staggering. While I'd been building a foundation for my future, he'd been bouncing between jobs, relationships, and half-finished projects, always with the family safety net ready to catch him. At 26, he'd never paid his own rent, never worried about groceries, never felt the weight of true independence. But what struck me most wasn't the inequality, it was how I'd been trained to accept it. Conditioned to believe that supporting Marcus was my responsibility. That questioning the arrangement made me selfish. That my success somehow obligated me to subsidize his failures. I thought about my coworker Jennifer, whose family celebrated her achievements instead of minimizing them. Her parents had driven 4 hours just to take her to dinner when she got her promotion. When she'd bought her first car, her siblings had thrown her a surprise party. The warmth in her voice when she talked about family gatherings made me realize how cold my own family interactions had become. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I called my college roommate Lisa, who'd witnessed some of those difficult years firsthand. We'd lost touch after graduation, but I found her number in my old contacts. "Hazel," she exclaimed when she heard my voice. "I was just thinking about you last week. How are you?" As I told her about Mom's visit, about the demand for money, Lisa's silence spoke volumes. When I finished, she took a deep breath. "Honey, do you remember what you used to say about your family? You called them emotional vampires. You said they drained you of energy and gave nothing back." I'd forgotten that phrase. But hearing it again made everything click into place. "You don't owe them anything," Lisa continued. "Especially not Marcus. You've already given more than enough." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I wasn't going to give Marcus the money. More than that, I wasn't going to explain or justify, or apologize for my choice. For the first time in my life, I was going to set a boundary and hold it, regardless of the consequences. But I knew that simply saying no wouldn't be enough. They'd push back, manipulate, and guilt trip. If I wanted this to stick, I needed a plan. Something that would make my position crystal clear and protect me from their usual tactics. Can I find the courage to change my life, or will I hesitate when it matters most? The plan came to me while I was organizing my financial documents that weekend. I'd always been meticulous with my records, every transaction categorized, every receipt filed. But as I looked through my bank statements, I realized I had something more powerful than just my own memories of their mistreatment. I had proof. The anonymous payments to Dad's medical account were all documented. 12 months of $500 contributions, always timed perfectly to prevent his care from being interrupted. If they wanted to play games about family obligations, I'd show them exactly what obligations I'd already been meeting without fanfare or recognition. But that was just the beginning. I spent hours researching Marcus's social media presence. Screenshot after screenshot revealing the truth about his difficult financial situation. Designer sneakers were posted 3 weeks ago. A weekend trip to Vegas with friends just last month. Expensive dinners at trendy restaurants while Mom was supposedly worried about his basic survival. The contrast between his public lifestyle and their sob story was glaring. Then I dug deeper into family finances, remembering conversations I'd overheard over the years. Mom had been so careful to hide Marcus's real situation from extended family. crafting a narrative about his artistic pursuits and finding his path. But I remembered Uncle Robert mentioning that Marcus had been given Dad's old car, which I later discovered had been sold for almost $10,000. Money that had vanished into whatever black hole absorbed all of Marcus's resources. The real masterstroke came when I remembered Mom's pride in her detailed family records. She kept everything, birth certificates, report cards, financial documents, in her home office. During my last holiday visit, I'd helped her organize some files and noticed she'd kept records of every loan and gift given to both her children over the years. I called my cousin Sarah, the only family member who'd always been honest with me. After some gentle questioning, she confirmed what I suspected. Mom had been tracking every dollar ever given to me versus Marcus. The disparity was staggering. Over the years, they'd invested nearly $40,000 more in him than in me. Not counting the ongoing support that never got documented. Armed with this information, I began crafting my response. Not just a simple no to their demand, but a comprehensive presentation of exactly why their request was not only unreasonable but hypocritical. I would lay out every hidden payment I'd been making, every advantage Marcus had received, every time they'd chosen his convenience over my achievements. But this wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about taking control of the narrative they'd written about me. For years, they'd painted me as the lucky one, the one who had everything easy, the one who owed the family her success. I was going to rewrite that story with facts, figures, and receipts they couldn't argue with. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. I wouldn't be cruel or vindictive. I would simply present the truth, clearly and completely, in a way that made their manipulation impossible to continue. They wanted to treat this like a business transaction? Fine. I'd show them exactly what the family books really looked like. Will I feel victorious when it's over, or will the consequences leave me feeling empty? I chose Sunday afternoon for the confrontation, knowing they'd be gathered at Mom and Dad's house for their weekly family dinner, the ritual I'd stopped attending months ago, claiming work obligations. This time, I showed up unannounced, carrying a manila folder that contained everything I'd compiled over the past week. Dad answered the door, his face lighting up with genuine surprise and pleasure. "Hazel. What a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in." His reaction reminded me why this whole situation hurt so much. He wasn't the problem, had never been the problem. He was just caught in the middle of Mom's manipulations, probably unaware of most of what had been happening behind the scenes. The living room fell silent when I walked in. Marcus was sprawled on the couch with his phone, wearing what looked like a brand new hoodie. Mom froze mid-sentence in whatever story she'd been telling Aunt Carol, who'd apparently been invited to witness what they probably assumed would be my capitulation. "I came to give you my answer about the monthly payments," I said, setting the folder on the coffee table with deliberate care. My voice was steady, calmer than I'd expected it to be. Mom's face brightened with what she must have thought was victory. "Oh, wonderful, honey. I knew you'd come around. Family has to stick together, after all." "You're absolutely right," I replied, opening the folder. "Family should stick together. Which is why I brought some information I thought everyone should see." The first document I pulled out was a printout of Dad's medical payment portal, showing 12 months of anonymous contributions. I placed it where everyone could see the dates and amounts clearly. "I've been paying $500 a month toward Dad's medical bills for the past year," I announced. Anonymous payments, because I didn't want recognition or praise. I just wanted to help. Dad's eyes widened as he leaned forward to look at the paper. "Hazel, you? That was you? The total is $6,000 so far," I continued, pulling out the next document. "Now, Marcus, this is interesting. According to these social media posts, you spent $800 on sneakers last month. Here's the Vegas trip that cost at least $1,500. And these restaurant receipts you posted suggest you're spending more on entertainment in a month than most people spend on groceries." Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his face flushing red. "Those aren't. I mean, I didn't, but wait, there's more." I was surprised by how calm I felt, how controlled. This wasn't anger, it was clarity. "Mom, remember when you helped me organize your files last Christmas? I couldn't help but notice your detailed records of family financial support." I placed the final document on the table, a spreadsheet I'd recreated from memory, cross-referenced with details Sarah had helped me confirm. "Over the past 10 years, according to your own records, you've given Marcus approximately $57,000 in direct support. Cars, tuition, rent payments, and emergency loans that were never repaid. My total? $15,000, most of which were actual loans that I did repay." The room was completely silent now except for the ticking of Dad's old clock on the mantel. "So when you tell me that Marcus needs $4,500 a month to get back on his feet, what you're really asking is for me to contribute another $54,000 over the next year to someone who has already received Nearly 4 times the family support I ever got. Aunt Carol was staring at the documents with obvious shock. Dad had gone completely pale. Mom's mouth was opening and closing like she was trying to speak but couldn't find words. Marcus finally broke the silence. Look, Hazel, it's not that simple. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut him off, my voice still eerily calm. I understand that you've never had to worry about rent because someone else was always paying it. I understand that you've never felt the stress of choosing between groceries and textbooks because those choices were made for you. I understand that you're 26 years old and have never truly supported yourself. I stood up, leaving the documents scattered across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. I also understand that I'm done. The words came out stronger than I'd expected. I'm done being treated like the family ATM. I'm done having my achievements minimized and my needs ignored. And I'm definitely done funding a lifestyle that I've never been able to afford for myself. Mom finally found her voice. Hazel, please, you're being unreasonable. We're family, you're right, we are family. Which is why I'll continue making those anonymous payments for Dad's medical care. Because that's what family actually does, we help each other when there's real need. Without fanfare or manipulation. I headed toward the door, but turned back one more time. Marcus, when you're ready to have an adult conversation about real financial planning and genuine independence, call me. Until then, the Bank of Hazel is permanently closed. As I walked out the door, leaving behind the stunned silence and scattered papers, one question echoed in my mind: will I feel relieved after this, or will it leave me questioning everything? The drive home was a blur of adrenaline and doubt. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, replaying every moment of the confrontation. Had I been too harsh? Too cold? The look on Dad's face when he realized I'd been secretly helping with his medical bills haunted me. He'd seemed hurt that I hadn't told him, confused by the family dynamics he was apparently only now beginning to understand. Back in my apartment, I paced from room to room, unable to settle. Part of me felt vindicated. Finally, the truth was out. The careful documentation, the clear presentation of facts, and the way Mom's manipulative smile had crumbled when faced with actual evidence. For once, I hadn't been the one left speechless and defeated, but another part of me felt hollow. Empty in a way I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed constantly through the evening. First, a long text from Mom filled with guilt trips and accusations. I never thought you could be so cruel, Hazel. After everything we've done for you. Then messages from Marcus, alternating between anger and attempts at manipulation. You really showed your true colors today. Hope you're happy now. What surprised me was the text from Aunt Carol an hour later. I had no idea about any of those numbers. You did the right thing, honey. That took courage. But it was Dad's call that broke my heart. His voice was tired, confused. Hazel, I don't understand what happened today. Your mother is very upset, and Marcus. Well, he's angry. But I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you've been doing for my medical bills. I wish I'd known. We could have talked about all of this. I almost apologized then. Almost fell back into the old pattern of smoothing things over, of making everyone else comfortable while swallowing my own feelings. The words were right there, I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have brought all that up in front of everyone. Instead, I found myself saying, Dad, has Mom ever told you how much financial support Marcus has received over the years compared to me? His long pause told me everything I needed to know. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, the same spot where Mom had delivered her demands just days earlier, and tried to understand what I was feeling. It wasn't the clean satisfaction I'd imagined. Revenge, it turned out, was more complicated than simply being right. I'd wanted them to understand how their treatment had affected me. To acknowledge the inequality, to finally see me as more than just a resource to be tapped when convenient. And in some ways, I'd achieved that. The shock on their faces had been real. The inability to argue with documented facts had been exactly what I'd hoped for. So why did I feel so unsettled? Maybe it was because confronting them hadn't changed the past. All those years of feeling invisible, of watching Marcus get opportunity after opportunity while I scraped by, none of that was erased by one afternoon of brutal honesty. The wounds were still there, just exposed to sunlight for the first time. Or maybe it was because I was realizing that my anger, justified as it was, had been masking something deeper. Fear. Fear that I really was unworthy of their love. That their treatment of me had been somehow earned or deserved. Proving them wrong with facts and figures hadn't touched that fundamental insecurity. As the evening wore on and my phone finally stopped buzzing, I found myself wondering, has revenge really brought me peace, or is there more healing to be done? The answer came to me 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning as I sat in my favorite coffee shop before work. I'd been coming here regularly since the confrontation. Needing the buzz of strangers' conversations to fill the silence that had replaced my family's constant demands and drama. I was reading when a young woman at the next table answered her phone. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice bright with genuine affection. What followed was a 10-minute conversation about her recent promotion, her mother's obvious pride audible even from where I sat. When she hung up, she was glowing with happiness. And I realized I was witnessing something I'd never experienced, unconditional family support. That's when it hit me. I'd been approaching this all wrong, the confrontation, the evidence, the satisfaction of finally being right, none of it had been about them. It had been about me. About proving to myself that I was worthy of respect, that my achievements mattered, that my boundaries were valid. I'd been seeking their validation through rebellion, which was still giving them power over my sense of self-worth. True empowerment, I realized, wasn't about making them acknowledge what they'd done wrong. It was about fully accepting what I'd done right. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos from the past year. There I was at the company holiday party, laughing with colleagues who valued my contributions. At Jennifer's housewarming, surrounded by friends who celebrated my successes without expecting anything in return. Hiking with my book club, having deep conversations with people who saw me as a whole person, not just a bank account with legs somewhere along the way, without even noticing. I'd built a life filled with genuine relationships based on mutual respect and care. I'd created the family I'd always wanted, one where achievements were celebrated, boundaries were honored, and love wasn't conditional on financial contributions. The family I was born into had taught me what I didn't want. But the family I'd chosen, my friends, my chosen community, had shown me what healthy relationships actually looked like. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both simple and revolutionary. I deleted the family group chat from my phone. Not in anger, but in acceptance. I would maintain individual relationships with those who could respect my boundaries, Dad, Aunt Carol, Sarah, but I was done participating in the toxic family system as a whole. I also did something I'd never done before. I went shopping for myself. Not necessities, not practical purchases, but something beautiful just because I wanted it. A piece of art for my living room wall, a vibrant landscape that reminded me of the hiking trips I'd been taking, the adventures I'd been having while they were focused on Marcus's latest crisis. As I hung the painting that evening, I realized the shift had been gradual but complete. I no longer felt like the family failure or the ungrateful daughter. I felt like Hazel, a woman who'd worked hard for what she had, who treated people with kindness, who deserved love that didn't come with strings attached. The angry, hurt part of me that had needed to confront them was finally quiet. Not because they'd changed, but because I no longer needed them to. Their opinion of me, their demands on my resources, their attempts to manipulate my emotions, none of it could touch the solid foundation of self-worth I'd built through my own efforts and genuine relationships. Standing in my living room, looking at my beautiful new painting in the space I'd created through my own hard work, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with who I was and what I'd built. Am I ready to move forward? Or is there still something I need to let go of? 6 months later, I found myself sitting in that same coffee shop, but everything had changed. Not the external world, the same baristas, the same morning rush, the same gentle hum of conversation. What had changed was the woman sitting in the corner booth, typing peacefully on her laptop. I was planning a trip to Scotland with my book club friends. 3 weeks of hiking, cozy pubs, and conversations with people who genuinely enjoyed my company. The old Hazel would have felt guilty about spending money on herself. Would have heard Mom's voice in her head calling it selfish. Would have somehow found a way to feel bad about being happy. This Hazel was simply excited. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Can't wait for tonight's dinner party. Should I save you a seat next to David?" I smiled, thinking about the gentle librarian she'd been trying to set me up with for months. Maybe tonight I'd actually say yes to his offers to grab coffee. Not because I needed someone to complete me, but because I was finally whole enough to share my life with someone who deserved the real me. The family situation had resolved itself in ways I couldn't have predicted. Dad and I talked regularly now, real conversations about books, his garden, my work. He'd started asking thoughtful questions about my life, showing interest in who I was rather than what I could provide. It turned out that once Mom's manipulation was exposed, he was genuinely curious about the daughter he'd never really known. Marcus had surprised everyone by getting a job at a local tech startup. No family connections, no financial safety net, just his own effort for the first time in his adult life. We'd exchanged a few tentative texts, nothing deep, but there was a respect there that had never existed before. Maybe someday we'd have a real relationship. Maybe not. Either way was okay with me. Mom had tried various tactics over the months: guilt, anger, playing victim, enlisting flying monkeys from extended family. But something had fundamentally shifted in me. Her emotions were no longer my responsibility to manage. Her disappointment in my choices no longer felt like a referendum on my worth. She was entitled to her feelings, but I was equally entitled to my boundaries. The anonymous payments to Dad's medical account had continued, but now he knew they were from me. "You don't have to keep doing this," he told me during one of our calls. "I want to," I'd replied. "But not because I have to. Because I choose to." The difference was everything. As I sat there planning my Scottish adventure, I realized I couldn't pinpoint exactly when the healing had completed itself. It hadn't been dramatic or sudden. One day I'd simply noticed that I could think about my childhood without the familiar ache in my chest. I could hear Marcus's name without feeling angry. I could remember Mom's manipulations without feeling small. The wounds hadn't disappeared, they'd become scars. Evidence of survival rather than sources of pain. My laptop chimed with an email from my boss about a promotion opportunity. Team leader for our new digital marketing initiative. More responsibility, better pay, recognition for the skills I'd been developing. The old me would have immediately worried about whether I deserved it, whether I was qualified enough, and whether accepting it made me somehow selfish. I replied, accepting the position before I could second-guess myself. Walking home that evening, I passed a young woman arguing on her phone with someone who was clearly trying to manipulate her into something she didn't want to do. Her voice was small, apologetic, defensive, all the tones I recognized from my own past. Part of me wanted to approach her, to tell her that she didn't have to accept treatment that made her feel bad about herself. Instead, I sent a little prayer into the universe that she would find her own strength, in her own time, in her own way. We all have to walk our own path to freedom. I in my apartment that night, surrounded by the life I'd built and the relationships I'd chosen. I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood. As I sat there planning my Scottish adventure, I realized I couldn't pinpoint exactly when the healing had completed itself. It hadn't been dramatic or sudden. One day I'd simply noticed that I could think about my childhood without the familiar ache in my chest. I could hear Marcus's name without feeling angry. I could remember Mom's manipulations without feeling small. The wounds hadn't disappeared, they'd become scars. Evidence of survival rather than sources of pain. My laptop chimed with an email from my boss about a promotion opportunity. Team leader for our new digital marketing initiative. More responsibility, better pay, recognition for the skills I'd been developing. The old me would have immediately worried about whether I deserved it, whether I was qualified enough, and whether accepting it made me somehow selfish. I replied, accepting the position before I could second-guess myself. Walking home that evening, I passed a young woman arguing on her phone with someone who was clearly trying to manipulate her into something she didn't want to do. Her voice was small, apologetic, defensive, all the tones I recognized from my own past. Part of me wanted to approach her, to tell her that she didn't have to accept treatment that made her feel bad about herself. Instead, I sent a little prayer into the universe that she would find her own strength, in her own time, in her own way. We all have to walk our own path to freedom. I in my apartment that night, surrounded by the life I'd built and the relationships I'd chosen. I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood, complete contentment. Not the manic happiness that comes from achievement or external validation, but the deep, quiet peace that comes from being exactly who you're meant to be. I was no longer the little girl desperate for approval, or the young woman afraid of disappointing others, or even the angry daughter seeking justice for past wrongs. I was simply Hazel, flawed, strong, worthy of love, deserving of respect, and finally, beautifully free. The story that had begun with betrayal and humiliation had become something else entirely, a journey home to myself.